The morning light filtered through the bedroom curtains in a way that felt different somehow, as if even the sun knew something had shifted in the universe. Michael had always been an early riser, the kind of man who found peace in those quiet moments before the world demanded his attention. At 44 years old, he thought he understood the rhythms of his life, the gentle predictability of 18 years of marriage, the comfortable chaos of raising two teenagers. But sometimes life has a way of revealing that everything you thought you knew was just an elaborate performance, and you were the only one who didn't know you were on stage. It started with whispers, really. Not the kind you hear with your ears, but the kind you feel in the spaces between words, in the pauses that last a heartbeat too long, in the smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. Michael worked from home as a software developer, a choice he'd made years ago when Emma was born, followed by Noah 2 years later. He wanted to be present, to be the kind of father who knew his children's teachers' names, who could recite their favorite books from memory, who never missed a soccer game or a school play. Sarah, his wife, worked in marketing for a tech startup downtown in Denver, Colorado. She was brilliant at her job, the kind of person who could sell ice to an Eskimo, as his mother used to say. Her energy filled rooms, her laugh could light up the darkest days, and for years, Michael thought he was the luckiest man alive to wake up next to her every morning. But love has a way of making you blind to the cracks forming in the foundation, doesn't it? You tell yourself that the late nights at the office are just deadlines, that the distant look in their eyes is just stress, that the way they turn away when you reach for their hand is just tiredness. You become an expert at explaining away the unexplainable, at finding reasons where there are only excuses. Father's Day was approaching, and in the Henderson household, it had always been a modest celebration. Michael never wanted grand gestures or expensive gifts. What mattered to him was the tradition they'd built over the years. Emma would make her famous chocolate chip pancakes, slightly burnt on the edges, just the way he pretended to like them. Noah would present whatever craft project he'd been secretly working on, and Sarah would orchestrate it all with the efficiency of a seasoned conductor. This year felt different, though. Sarah kept mentioning surprises, her eyes dancing with what he thought was excitement, but would later recognize as something else entirely. Emma, now 16 and usually glued to her phone, would look up and exchange meaningful glances with her mother whenever Father's Day was mentioned. Even Noah, 14 and typically lost in his video games, seemed to be in on whatever secret they were harboring. Michael found it endearing, this conspiracy of love he imagined they were plotting. He pictured them huddled together after he went to bed, planning whatever surprise awaited him. The thought warmed him during the long coding sessions, made him smile when he caught glimpses of hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when he entered the room. Saturday night before Father's Day, Sarah was particularly animated. She moved through their evening routine with an energy that seemed almost nervous, checking her phone repeatedly, smiling at messages he couldn't see. When they went to bed, she turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "Don't make any plans for tomorrow," she said, her hand briefly touching his arm before pulling away. "We have something special planned. You're going to love it." Michael fell asleep that night feeling grateful, loved, secure in the knowledge that he was seen and appreciated by the people who mattered most. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of pristine Colorado sunshine that made the mountains visible from their bedroom window. Michael woke slowly, expecting to hear the familiar sounds of breakfast preparation. Maybe Emma's music playing too loud from the kitchen speaker. Noah's complaints about being woken up early. Instead, there was silence. Not the peaceful kind of quiet that comes with a sleeping house, but an empty silence that echoed with absence. The bed beside him was cold, Sarah's pillow barely indented, as if she'd been gone for hours. Michael padded downstairs, his bare feet silent on the hardwood floors they'd installed together 5 summers ago. The kitchen was spotless, no evidence of pancake preparation, no smell of coffee brewing. The living room held no poorly wrapped presents, no handmade cards propped against the television. He checked his phone, expecting a message explaining the delay. Maybe they'd gone to get special ingredients or pick up a surprise. Nothing. The last text from Sarah was from Friday, confirming he'd grabbed milk on his way home. Emma and Noah hadn't responded to his good morning texts from the night before, which wasn't unusual for teenagers, but in context felt like another small abandonment. By 10 o'clock, confusion had given way to concern. Michael called Sarah's phone, and it went straight to voicemail. He tried Emma next, hearing it ring from somewhere in the house. She'd left it behind, which was unheard of. Noah's phone was similarly abandoned on his nightstand. The cars were gone, both Sarah's SUV and his sedan, which Emma had been using since getting her license. At 11:30, still wearing yesterday's t-shirt and pajama pants, Michael opened Instagram, hoping for some clue to their whereabouts. He rarely used social media, preferring to experience life rather than document it. But Sarah and Emma were prolific posters. Emma's story appeared at the top of his feed, posted just 20 minutes ago. The first image made him stop breathing. It was a perfectly staged brunch table at Josephine's, the upscale restaurant downtown where they went for special occasions. Champagne flutes caught the light, orange juice sparkled in crystal glasses, and 4 place settings were artfully arranged. 4, not 5. The camera panned across the table, showing Sarah, radiant in a sundress he'd never seen before. Emma wearing makeup that made her look older than her 16 years. Noah in a button-down shirt. And Sarah's best friend Catherine, raising her mimosa in a toast. But it was the caption that shattered something fundamental inside Michael's chest. Best dad ever. When he's not around. LOL. But Father's Day had brunch vibes have finally free, with a string of laughing emojis that felt like tiny daggers. His hands shook as he scrolled to the next story, a boomerang of clinking glasses. Catherine's voice in the background saying something about freedom from the mundane. Another photo, this time of Sarah, her smile wider than he'd seen in months, with the caption, "Sometimes the best gift is absence." Michael sat on the couch, the same spot where just last week they'd all watched a movie together. Emma's head on his shoulder, Noah's feet in his lap, Sarah curled against his other side. How had that moment of family closeness been an illusion? When had his presence become something to escape from, rather than embrace? The questions multiplied like cells dividing, each one spawning new doubts, new wounds. He didn't call them. What would he say? Why am I not there? The answer was already painfully clear, because they didn't want him there. This wasn't a mistake or a miscommunication. This was deliberate, planned, executed with the same precision Sarah brought to her marketing campaigns. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves knew something he was just beginning to understand. Every family photo seemed to mock him. Every reminder of shared memories felt like evidence he'd misread. The Father's Day mug Emma had made in 3rd grade sat in the cabinet, "World's Best Dad" painted in uneven letters. Had she already been pretending then? Or had something changed, some invisible shift he'd been too blind to see? The afternoon stretched endlessly. Michael heated leftover pasta, ate standing at the counter, unable to sit at the dining table where they'd shared thousands of meals. He wandered the house like a ghost, touching objects that suddenly felt foreign. Sarah's romance novels stacked by her bedside. When had she stopped reading them next to him? Noah's sports trophies. When had Michael stopped being the one he ran to after victories? Emma's art supplies? When had she stopped asking him to look at her work? Evening came without word from any of them. No apology, no explanation, no acknowledgement that this day meant for celebrating fathers had become a celebration of his absence. Michael found himself in his home office, surrounded by the certificates and awards that marked his professional success, wondering when personal failure had crept in so quietly. He'd optimized code for 20 years, but couldn't debug his own family. The irony wasn't lost on him. When they finally returned at nearly 9 that night, Michael was sitting in darkness, having not bothered to turn on the lights as day faded to dusk. He heard Sarah's key in the lock, Emma's voice carrying through the door, Noah's laughter at something Catherine had said. They entered like returning conquerors, still bright with the day's joy, until Sarah flicked on the light and saw him there. The transformation was instant. Sarah's smile faltered, Emma's face went pale. Noah looked between his parents with the dawning realization that something was very wrong. Catherine, still tipsy from brunch, excused herself quickly, muttering about needing to get home. "Michael," Sarah started, her marketing voice sliding into place, smooth and controlled. "We didn't think you'd be up. Did you have a good day? We left you to sleep in, figured you'd enjoy the quiet." The lie came so easily, so naturally, that Michael wondered how many others he'd swallowed without tasting their bitterness. Emma fidgeted with her phone, suddenly fascinated by the screen she'd abandoned all day. Noah edged toward the stairs, ready to escape to the safety of his room. "I saw the posts," Michael said quietly, his voice steady despite the earthquake in his chest. "The stories, the captions, Sarah's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something that might have been guilt, but looked more like annoyance at being caught. Oh, that was just Emma being silly. You know how teenagers are with social media. Everything's a joke to them. But Michael had already seen too much to accept the deflection. He'd gone deeper into their digital footprints, found the group chat where plans had been made, seen the reservation confirmation Sarah had sent to Catherine 2 weeks prior. This wasn't spontaneous teenager humor. This was choreographed exclusion. Don't, he said, standing slowly. Don't insult me further by pretending this was Emma's idea. I saw the messages, Sarah. I saw the planning. What I don't understand is why. Emma finally looked up, tears streaming down her face, and for a moment Michael saw his little girl again, the one who used to crawl into his lap during thunderstorms. Dad, I'm sorry. Mom said, she said you'd prefer to rest, that we were doing you a favor. Sarah shot her daughter a sharp look, but the truth was already spilling out. Noah added quietly, she said you'd been seeming tired of family stuff, that maybe you needed a break. The words hung in the air, and Michael saw it all clearly now. Sarah had been planting seeds, carefully cultivating a narrative where his dedication looked like exhaustion. His presence felt like pressure. His love seemed like a burden. I need some air, Michael said, moving toward the door. Sarah reached for his arm, but he pulled away. Michael, you're overreacting. It was just brunch. We're here now. We can celebrate. But celebrate what? The successful execution of making him feel invisible in his own life? The public humiliation disguised as humor? The careful grooming of his children to see him as optional? I'll be back, he said, though he wasn't sure if it was true. He drove through the Denver streets, the city lights blurring through tears he hadn't realized were falling. He ended up at the reservoir, parking in the spot where he'd proposed to Sarah 19 years ago. The moon reflected on the water, and Michael wondered when their reflection had stopped showing two people in love and started showing a woman planning her escape. His phone buzzed repeatedly. Sarah's calls, Emma's texts, even one from Noah asking if he was okay. He didn't answer any of them. Instead, he called his brother James in Phoenix, the one person who'd never judge him for the tears in his voice. They went to Father's Day brunch without me, he said without preamble when James answered. Posted about how great it was that I wasn't there. The silence on the other end stretched long before James said, Pack a bag, Mike. Come here. We'll figure this out. But Michael wasn't ready to run. Not yet. He needed to understand how he'd become a ghost in his own life story. Returning to the house after midnight, Michael found Sarah waiting in the living room, still in her sundress but with her marketing mask firmly in place. We need to talk about your behavior, she started, and Michael almost laughed at the audacity. His behavior? He'd spent the day alone on Father's Day while his family toasted his absence. But he let her talk, watched her spin the narrative where he was unstable, overreacting, making the children uncomfortable with his dramatics. It was masterful, really, how she turned his pain into a weapon against him. Sarah, he interrupted finally. How long have you been unhappy? The question seemed to surprise her, cracking her composed facade. What? I'm not. This isn't about happiness, Michael. This is about you sulking over a silly brunch. But he pressed on. No, really. How long have you been planning your exit? Because that's what this is, isn't it? A test run. See how life feels without me. The accusation hit its mark. Sarah's face cycled through emotions before settling on defiance. You want the truth? Fine. I've been drowning for years. You're here all the time, hovering, involved in everything. I can't breathe. The kids can't breathe. Today was the first time in months I've seen Emma really laugh. The words were meant to wound, and they did, but they also illuminated something Michael had been too afraid to see. This wasn't about his presence, it was about her absence. While he'd been building a family, she'd been planning an escape route. The weeks that followed were a careful dance of pretense and pain. Michael slept in the guest room, went through the motions of family life while documenting everything. He discovered Sarah's Plan B folder on their shared cloud storage, complete with apartment listings, attorney consultations, and financial projections for life after divorce. She'd been meticulous, planning her new life while he'd been maintaining their current one. Most painful were the emails to Catherine discussing how to manage Michael's reaction and keep the kids neutral. He wasn't a husband to be divorced. He was a problem to be handled. Emma came to him one evening, finding him in his office staring at code that made more sense than his marriage. Dad, she said softly, hovering in the doorway like she used to when she was little and wanted to ask for something. I'm sorry about Father's Day. Mom made it seem like you'd be happier without us bothering you. Michael turned from his computer, really looking at his daughter for the first time in weeks. She'd lost weight, her usual bright demeanor dimmed by the tension in the house. Em, you could never bother me. Ever. You and Noah are the best parts of my life. She crumpled then, 16 years old, but suddenly seeming so much younger as she sobbed about feeling caught in the middle, about Mom saying one thing and him showing another, about not knowing what was real anymore. That night, Michael made a decision. He wouldn't let Sarah's narrative become their truth. He started having individual conversations with both kids, not about their mother, but about their relationship with him. He took Noah to baseball games, just the two of them, rebuilding the connection Sarah had been trying to sever. He attended every one of Emma's art shows, even the ones Sarah forgot to mention. Slowly, the fog of manipulation began to clear, and his children started seeing the situation for what it was. The final confrontation came on a Thursday evening in August. Sarah had been increasingly agitated as her control slipped, as the kids chose to spend more time with Michael, as her careful plans unraveled. You're poisoning them against me, she accused, finding him in the kitchen preparing dinner. Actually, Michael replied calmly, chopping vegetables with practiced precision. I'm just being their father, the same way I've always been. The only difference is now they notice because you're not there telling them to look away. She slammed her hand on the counter, making the knife jump. This is exactly why I needed out. You're so damn perfect all the time, Saint Michael, the devoted father, the dedicated husband. Do you know how exhausting it is to live with someone who never makes mistakes? And there it was. Finally. The truth beneath all the manipulation and blame. Sarah didn't want a partner. She wanted a mirror for her own choices. Michael's consistency made her inconsistency visible. His presence highlighted her absence. His contentment with family life emphasized her desperation to escape it. I make mistakes all the time, Michael said quietly. My biggest one was not seeing how unhappy you were. But Sarah, instead of talking to me, you turned our children into weapons. You tried to erase me from my own life. That's not a mistake, that's a choice. She left that night, staying with Catherine while she apartment hunted. The kids chose to remain with Michael, a decision that sent Sarah into a spiral of social media posts about ungrateful children and manipulative exes. But the truth has a way of surfacing, and those who knew them saw through the performance. The divorce proceedings were swift once Sarah realized her Plan B had become Plan A by necessity rather than choice. She'd wanted to leave on her terms, with the narrative intact, the children aligned with her version of events. Instead, she left exposed. Her manipulations documented, her careful image management in ruins. Michael kept the house, the kids, and most importantly, his relationship with them. He learned to cook Emma's favorite pasta from scratch, figured out Noah's complicated baseball statistics, created new traditions that didn't rely on Sarah's orchestration. On Father's Day the following year, Michael woke to the smell of genuinely burnt pancakes and the sound of his children arguing over playlist choices in the kitchen. Emma had indeed made breakfast, Noah had crafted a genuinely terrible ceramic mug in art class, and they spent the day together playing board games and sharing stories. No one posted on social media. No one performed happiness for an audience. They just were. A father and his children, rebuilding their family with honesty instead of facades. Sarah sent a text that morning, a brief, Happy Father's Day, that Michael read but didn't respond to. He was too busy living the life she'd tried to convince him he didn't deserve, surrounded by the love she'd attempted to steal. The sun set on a day that was perfectly imperfect, authentically theirs and free from the shadow of someone who'd confused performance with connection, image with reality. Later that evening, as Michael tucked away Noah's handmade mug with his collection of imperfect Father's Day gifts, Emma found him in the kitchen. Dad? She said, her voice tentative. Do you have no more? Actually, Sarah's, but the truth, Michael, she was divorced too. Understood the complexity of blended families and the scars left by betrayal dressed as love. Their relationship grew slowly, built on honesty rather than image management. She's nothing like Mom, Noah observed after Linda joined them for dinner one evening. No, she's not, Michael agreed. Is that weird for you? Noah considered this, then shook his head. Mom was always acting, wasn't she? Even when we thought she wasn't. Linda just is. The simplicity of his son's observation held profound truth. Sarah had been so focused on curating their life that she'd forgotten to live it. Every moment had been potential content, every family interaction an opportunity for image management. Linda brought no cameras to dinner, posted no updates about their relationship status, felt no need to broadcast their happiness to prove it existed. 3 years after that Father's Day betrayal, Michael stood in the backyard watching Emma graduate high school. Sarah was there, of course, maintaining her image as devoted mother despite her sporadic involvement in the daily work of parenting. She'd arrived late, perfectly dressed, ready for photos she could post with captions about proud mama moments. But Emma, wise beyond her years, orchestrated the family photos carefully. One set with Sarah for the public record, another with Michael, Linda, and Noah that actually made it onto her wall. You know what I learned from all this? Emma told Michael later, as they cleaned up from the graduation party. That love isn't about the performance. It's about who shows up when there's no audience. She was heading to art school in the fall, choosing to study something that fed her soul, rather than her mother's need for prestigious bragging rights. Noah, now a senior himself, had learned his own lessons about authenticity, choosing friends who liked him for his terrible jokes rather than his family's perceived status. Michael sometimes wondered what would have happened if he'd never seen that Instagram story, if he'd remained ignorant of the brunch, the mockery, the careful planning of his exclusion. Would Sarah have continued her performance indefinitely? Would the children have eventually seen through it on their own? But these were questions without answers, paths untaken that led nowhere useful. What mattered was the path they were on now, imperfect, authentic, and entirely their own. He'd learned that being a father wasn't about being appreciated on designated holidays or performed gratitude in public spaces. It was about the Tuesday night homework help, the Saturday morning basketball games, the quiet moments when your teenager actually talks to you about their fears. It was about showing up consistently even when, especially when, there was no audience to applaud your efforts. The last time Michael saw Sarah was at Noah's high school graduation. She arrived with her new boyfriend, a man who looked like he'd been ordered from a lifestyle catalog, all white teeth and obvious wealth. She performed her role flawlessly. Proud mother, successful divorcee, woman who had it all figured out. But Michael noticed the cracks. How Emma stepped away from her overly affectionate touches. How Noah's smile never quite reached his eyes in photos with her. How even the boyfriend seemed uncomfortable with the level of performance required. After the ceremony, she cornered Michael near the punch bowl, her smile sharp as glass. "You must be so proud," she said, loud enough for nearby parents to hear. Though I suppose it's easier when you don't have the pressure of maintaining everything else. The barb was obvious. She still painted him as the checked-out father who'd had the luxury of focusing on the children while she handled the hard work of, what? Crafting Instagram stories? "I am proud," Michael replied simply. "Of both of them. They've become remarkable people." He didn't add despite your efforts to weaponize them or because they learned to see through manipulation. He didn't need to. Sarah's face tightened at his refusal to engage in verbal warfare. "Well," she said, adjusting her designer bag, "I suppose we all do our best with what we're given." As she walked away, Linda appeared at his elbow, having watched the interaction from across the room. "You okay?" she asked quietly. Michael considered the question. Was he okay? He'd been betrayed by someone he'd trusted completely. Had his children turned against him, been publicly mocked on a day meant to celebrate his role in their lives. But he'd also discovered his own strength. Rebuilt authentic relationships with his children, found real love with someone who valued truth over image. "Yeah," he said, meaning it. "I really am." That night, after all the graduation festivities ended, Michael sat on the back deck with Emma and Noah. Linda had tactfully given them family time, understanding that some moments belonged just to them. They talked about college plans, summer jobs, the future stretching before them, full of possibility. Neither of them mentioned their mother, though her absence from this quiet celebration felt more significant than her presence at the public one. "Remember that Father's Day?" Emma asked suddenly, breaking into their comfortable silence. "The brunch thing?" Noah groaned. "Do we have to? That was so cringe." But Emma persisted. "I think about it sometimes. How Mom convinced us it would be funny, that you'd appreciate the joke. We were so stupid. Michael shook his head. You weren't stupid. You were kids being manipulated by someone you trusted. There's a difference. They sat quietly for a moment before Noah spoke. You know what's weird? I can barely remember the brunch itself. Like, I know we went. I've seen the pictures, but what I actually remember from that day is coming home and seeing you in the dark. Just sitting there. You looked so broken. The honesty of the observation hit Michael unexpectedly. He'd tried so hard to shield them from his pain in the aftermath, but children see more than we think they do. I was broken, he admitted, for a little while. But you know what? Sometimes things need to break before they can be rebuilt properly. Our family was held together by performance and pretense. It needed to break so we could build something real. Emma reached over and took his hand. Noah bumped his shoulder against his father's in that way teenage boys show affection. They sat there as the stars came out over Denver. Three people who'd survived a betrayal and come out the other side not unscathed, but undaunted. Years later, when Emma had her own children and Noah was navigating his first serious relationship, they would both call their father for advice. Not because he was perfect, but because he was real. He'd shown them that love wasn't about grand gestures or public declarations, but about the quiet consistency of showing up. He'd taught them that manipulation dressed as affection was still manipulation, that authentic connection trumped perfect image every time. Michael would tell his grandchildren stories, carefully edited for young ears, about the importance of being true to yourself and others. He'd watch Emma navigate motherhood with an honesty that would have horrified Sarah, admitting her struggles on social media alongside her joys, refusing to curate a perfect life that didn't exist. He'd see Noah choose a partner who valued him for his kindness rather than his potential as an Instagram prop. And sometimes on quiet Sunday mornings, Michael would remember that Father's Day when his family celebrated his absence. Not with bitterness, but with something approaching gratitude, because that was the day the performance ended and real life began. It was the day he learned that being left out of someone's curated story meant you were free to write your own. And what a story it had become. Not perfect, not Instagram-worthy in its messy authenticity, but true. Beautifully, painfully, wonderfully true. The kind of truth that doesn't need a filter, doesn't require an audience, doesn't demand appreciation through public display. Just a father and his children, building a life on the radical idea that showing up matters more than showing off. That being present beats being perfect, and that sometimes the best gift you can give your children is the courage to choose authenticity over appearance, connection over performance, truth over the comfortable lie. In the end, that Father's Day hadn't been a loss at all. It had been a revelation, a gift wrapped in pain but containing the seeds of everything that would grow after. Michael had lost a wife but found himself. His children had lost an illusion, but gained a father who would never ask them to perform their love for public consumption. They'd all lost a carefully curated life, but found something infinitely more valuable. Each other, honest and whole, and finally, truly, home. The healing hadn't happened overnight, of course. There were months when Michael would wake at 3 a.m, his mind replaying conversations, searching for signs he'd missed. He'd lie in the darkness of the guest room that had become his bedroom, wondering if he could have done something differently. Should he have been less present, given Sarah more space? But therapy helped him understand that you can't fix a relationship where only one person admits it's broken. Martinez, a soft-spoken woman who specialized in family trauma, helped him see that Sarah's dissatisfaction had little to do with his actions and everything to do with her own internal narrative. Some people, Martinez explained during one session, need to create conflict to justify their desires. If you had been absent, she would have complained about that. If you'd been perfect, which no one is, she would have found imperfection. The story she needed to tell herself required you to be the villain. It was Emma who first suggested family therapy, approaching Michael one evening as he worked late on a project. "Dad, I think we need help," she said, her voice small but determined. "Noah and we don't know how to feel about Mom. We love her, but we're also really angry. And we feel guilty for being angry, and then angry about feeling guilty, and it's just a lot." Michael closed his laptop, giving her his full attention, something he'd always done despite Sarah's claims of his absence. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Just keep being you, but maybe with someone who can help us sort through all this mess." So they went, the three of them, to a family therapist who specialized in parental alienation and divorce. Noah was resistant at first, his teenage pride wounded by the idea of needing help. But after the first session, where he was finally able to express his confusion and hurt without judgment, he became the most dedicated attendee. The therapist helped them understand that loving someone didn't mean accepting harmful behavior, that they could maintain a relationship with their mother while also maintaining boundaries. Your feelings are valid, the therapist told them repeatedly. All of them. The love, the anger, the disappointment, the hope. They can all exist together. Michael watched his children navigate this complex emotional terrain with a mixture of pride and sorrow. They shouldn't have had to become this mature, this self-aware, this young, but they handled it with a grace that amazed him. Emma started journaling, filling notebooks with her thoughts and feelings. Some entries she shared with Michael, others she kept private, and he respected both choices. Noah threw himself into sports with renewed vigor, using physical activity to process emotions he couldn't quite verbalize. Michael made sure to be at every game, every practice, a steady presence in the stands. Sarah's attempts to maintain her narrative grew increasingly desperate as time went on. She created elaborate stories about why the children chose to live with Michael, each version painting her as either the victim or the hero, depending on her audience. To her work colleagues, she was the dedicated professional who sacrificed family time for career success. To new acquaintances, she was the mother whose ex-husband had poisoned her children against her. To her social media followers, she was living her best life, freed from the constraints of traditional family structures. But reality has a way of seeping through the cracks of even the most carefully constructed facades. Catherine, Sarah's best friend and brunch companion, eventually reached out to Michael. It was an awkward phone call full of pauses and attempted justification. "I didn't know," she said finally. "I mean, I knew about the brunch, obviously, but I thought it was just a joke. A little breathing room. I didn't know about everything else." Michael listened without comment as Catherine unraveled the truth she'd been avoiding. Sarah had been painting him as controlling and suffocating for years, building a case for her eventual exit. The Father's Day brunch had been presented as a harmless prank, a way to give Sarah a break from his supposed intensity. "She made you sound..." Catherine paused, searching for words. "Different. Not like the Michael I knew, and I should have questioned it. I should have asked you. I'm sorry." The conversation with Catherine illuminated something Michael had been struggling to understand. Sarah hadn't just been planning to leave. She'd been creating a support system for her departure, carefully crafting a narrative that would justify her actions. It was a long-term campaign, executed with the same strategic thinking she brought to her marketing projects. He'd been rebranded without his knowledge, transformed from devoted husband and father into an obstacle to be overcome. The realization should have made him angry, but instead it brought a strange kind of peace. It wasn't about him. It had never been about him. It was about Sarah's need to be the hero of her own story, even if it meant casting everyone else as villains. The first Christmas after the separation was a minefield of emotions. Sarah insisted on having the children for Christmas Eve, invoking the separation agreement with the precision of a lawyer. Michael agreed, wanting to avoid conflict that would only hurt Emma and Noah. But when they returned on Christmas morning, they were subdued, their usual holiday excitement dampened. "How was it?" Michael asked carefully, as they settled in for their own celebration. Noah shrugged, fidgeting with his phone. "It was weird. Mom had this whole agenda. Like, we had to take specific photos at specific times for her Instagram. And her boyfriend was there, trying really hard to be cool with us." Emma added, "She kept asking us about you. Like, was your girlfriend spending Christmas with us? Were we happy?" It felt like an interrogation disguised as conversation. Linda had indeed joined them for Christmas dinner, but only after careful discussion with the kids about their comfort level. She brought homemade pie and terrible Christmas jokes, fitting into their dynamic without trying to replace anyone. The contrast between the two celebrations was stark. One orchestrated for public consumption, the other organically unfolding in private joy. "You know what's funny?" Emma said later as they cleaned up wrapping paper. "Mom gave us really expensive gifts, like ridiculous stuff, but it all felt like she was trying to buy something. Here, you made us pancakes in Santa shapes like when we were little, and that meant more than any of it." Michael's relationship with Linda deepened gradually. built on a foundation of absolute honesty. She'd been through her own divorce, understood the navigation required when children were involved. "I'm not trying to be their mother," she told Michael early on. "They have one, complicated as that relationship might be. I'm just hoping to be a positive presence in their lives." And she was. Linda attended Noah's games when invited, helped Emma with art school applications, and never once posted about it on social media. She understood that real relationships didn't require public validation. The legal divorce was finalized on a rainy Tuesday in March, almost anticlimactic after the emotional divorce that had preceded it. Michael sat in his lawyer's office, signing papers that officially ended a union that had been dead far longer than he'd realized. Sarah appeared via video call, citing a work conflict that prevented her physical presence. Even in this final moment, she was performing distance. The judge asked the standard questions, they gave the standard answers, and just like that, 18 years of marriage dissolved into legal documentation. Michael felt neither triumph nor despair, just a quiet recognition that paperwork was merely catching up to reality. But life has a way of moving forward even when you're still processing the past. Emma graduated with honors, her art portfolio earning her acceptance to her dream school. The piece that secured her scholarship was a series titled Unfiltered, exploring the disconnect between social media presentation and reality. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Noah discovered a passion for engineering, spending hours building and rebuilding computers, finding in circuits and code the predictability that human relationships had failed to provide. Michael supported both paths, attending every art show, every science fair, every moment that mattered. Sarah's attendance at these events became increasingly sporadic. She'd RSVP, yes, then cancel at the last minute, always with elaborate excuses. Work emergencies, sudden illnesses, unavoidable conflicts. A pattern emerged of promises made and broken. The children learned to expect her absence, saving her a seat that would remain empty. No longer surprised when Michael arrived alone. "Ty, at least she's consistent," Noah joked darkly after she missed his robotics competition. Consistently inconsistent. But Michael heard the hurt beneath the humor, saw the way Noah's eyes still searched the crowd just in case. 2 years after the divorce, Michael received an unexpected message from Sarah's mother, Patricia. They'd maintained a cordial relationship throughout the marriage, but contact had ceased after the separation. Patricia's email was brief. "I'd like to talk to you about Sarah, and to apologize." They met for coffee on a quiet Wednesday afternoon, Patricia looking older than Michael remembered, worn down by something beyond normal aging. "I failed her," Patricia said without preamble. "And because I failed her, she failed you and the children." Michael listened as his former mother-in-law unraveled a family history he'd only glimpsed during his marriage. Sarah's father had been similarly image-obsessed, creating a household where appearance mattered more than authenticity. Patricia had tried to maintain the facade until it crumbled in a spectacular divorce when Sarah was 15. "I thought I was protecting her by pretending everything was fine," Patricia explained. "Instead, I taught her that performance was more important than truth. She learned to create perfect pictures because she'd never seen what real looked like." The conversation recontextualized everything, though it didn't excuse it. Understanding the origins of Sarah's behavior, it didn't minimize the damage it had caused, but it did help Michael release the last vestiges of anger he'd been carrying. Sarah was replaying patterns, trapped in a cycle she might not even recognize. He shared Patricia's insights with Emma and Noah, carefully, wanting them to have context without feeling obligated to forgive. "So Mom's broken because Grandpa was broken?" Noah asked, his engineering mind seeking clear causation. "It's more complex than that," Michael explained. "People can recognize patterns and choose to break them. Mom hasn't made that choice yet. Maybe she never will, but you two can." And they did. Emma's art evolved from angry abstracts to pieces that explored healing and growth. She started they were all she'd already Emma was home from art school. Noah had just gotten his driver's license, and Linda had seamlessly woven herself into their traditions. They spent the day at the lake, fishing and failing to catch anything, eating slightly sandy sandwiches and laughing at Noah's attempts to skip stones. No one took photos for social media. No one performed happiness. They simply lived it, imperfectly and authentically. That evening, as they sat around a campfire roasting marshmallows, Emma pulled out her phone. Michael tensed reflexively, the old wounds still tender, but she wasn't opening Instagram. Instead, she showed him a digital art piece she'd been working on. A portrait of their family, unconventional in its composition, but beautiful in its honesty. "There's something I need to tell you," Emma said, her voice serious. Michael's heart rate spiked, parental anxiety always ready to spring into action. "I've been seeing a therapist at school, not because I'm struggling, but because I want to make sure I don't repeat the patterns. I want to be able to have healthy relationships, to be honest even when it's hard to show up for people without needing an audience." Michael pulled her into a hug, Noah joining them, Linda smiling from her place by the fire. This was the real victory. Not that they'd survived the destruction of their family, but that they'd learned from it, grown from it, chosen to be different. Years would pass. Emma would graduate, become a successful artist known for pieces that explored authenticity in the digital age. She'd marry someone who understood that love was a verb, not a photo opportunity. Noah would pursue engineering, designing systems that prioritized function over form, reliability over flash. He'd date cautiously but honestly, never hiding his complex family history but never letting it define him. Michael and Linda would marry in a small ceremony attended by the people who'd stood by them through the rebuilding. No professional photographers, no social media announcements, just promises made and meant. Sarah would continue her pattern, a new relationship every few years, each one beginning with grand gestures and ending with familiar complaints. The children would maintain contact carefully, boundaries firmly in place. They'd see her on holidays sometimes, accept her sporadic affection, but never depend on it. They'd love her as she was capable of being loved, from a safe distance, without expectations, with the understanding that some people are better appreciated in small doses. And they'd be okay with that, because they'd learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by who shows up consistently, who loves without conditions, who values truth over performance. Michael would sometimes think about that Father's Day, the one that changed everything. He'd remember the confusion, the pain, the humiliation of being publicly discarded. But mostly, he'd remember it as the day his real life began. The day the masks came off and the truth, however painful, set them all free. Because sometimes the best thing that can happen to a family built on lies is for it to fall apart, creating space for something genuine to grow in its place. The children who'd once laughed about their father's absence had become adults who valued his presence. The man who'd been told he was too much had found people who couldn't get enough of his authentic self. The family that had been destroyed by performance had been rebuilt on a foundation of truth. And really, isn't that what family is supposed to be? Not a performance staged for others' approval, but a safe harbor where you can drop the mask and just be yourself. Knowing you're loved not for the role you play, but for the person you are when the cameras stop rolling and the audience goes home. That's the lesson Michael learned that Father's Day, sitting alone in an empty house while his family toasted his absence. Sometimes the greatest gift is discovering who really loves you when there's nothing left to perform. Sometimes the best Father's Day present is the truth, even when it comes wrapped in pain. Because truth, unlike performance, lasts. It builds foundations that don't crumble under scrutiny. It creates connections that don't require constant maintenance and image management. It allows for the kind of love that survives bad days and boring moments, that doesn't need documentation to be real. In the quiet moments, when Michael watched his children navigate their adult lives with honesty and integrity, he knew that every moment of pain had been worth it. They'd learned the most important lesson he could teach them. That being real is always better than being perfect. That showing up authentically beats showing off every time. And that the people who truly love you will stay even when the show is over. That Father's Day when they celebrated his absence had actually been the beginning of his most important presence. Not as a character in someone else's performance, but as himself, fully and unapologetically. Finally home in his own life.